What if Anakin walked to the high ground instead of jumping? What would happen then? We pick up with Obi Wan, having taken the high ground, telling Anakin it's over. Let's begin. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. Obi-Wan's voice carried across the sulphurous air from his position on the black glass embankment. You underestimate my power, Anakin snarled. His cybernetic hand clenched, calling on the Force to guide the floating platform smoothly against the riverbank. The metal beneath his feet pinged and crackled as it cooled against the volcanic shore. Don't try it, Obi-Wan warned, adjusting his footing on the obsidian slope. Anakin paused, tactical assessment overriding rage for a crucial moment. The distance, the angle, memory flashed. Naboo, 13 years ago, Obi-Wan's leap over Maul. Understanding flooded through him. Obi-Wan wasn't just warning him about the high ground, he was laying a trap, goading Anakin to attempt the same leaping maneuver that Obi-Wan himself had used to defeat Maul years ago. Anakin's eyes narrowed with cold focus. The volcanic sand shifted under his boots as he stepped onto the bank, lightsaber blazing at his side. He began ascending, each step measured, deliberate, never breaking eye contact with his former master. Obi-Wan's composure cracked, just for an instant. In that microscopic tell, Anakin saw it all. Obi-Wan had expected blind fury, not cold calculation. Their sabers clashed anew, plasma fields screaming against each other. As they exchanged blows, Anakin's mind churned with dark revelation. Padme's arrival suddenly made sense, a calculated piece in Obi-Wan's game. He had manipulated her, used her fears, orchestrated this entire confrontation. Anakin hadn't seen it earlier, but now he did. Obi-Wan hadn't turned her against him, he had turned him against her. The realization ignited something deeper than rage in Anakin's core. The flaw in Obi-Wan's defense appeared, fatigue and eroding confidence, creating a momentary gap. Anakin's blade moved with lethal intent. The first strike separated both hands at the wrists. The second carved through Obi-Wan's torso. No final words passed between them as Anakin sent the bifurcated body plummeting into the magma river below. He tracked his former master's force presence until it extinguished completely. Then he turned toward the landing platform, sensing Padme's life force. She was alive. He could sense it. When he reached the platform, he found R2 and 3PO had already moved her into her ship. He rushed aboard, finding her unconscious but breathing on a medical cot. Padme, he whispered, initiating the launch sequence. I'm sorry. Everything will be fine now. The ship lifted off, leaving the hellscape of Mustafar behind. Throughout the journey to Coruscant, he kept returning to her side, watching for any sign of consciousness, murmuring promises of their future together. The former Grand Republic medical facility loomed ahead, the finest medical center in the galaxy. As the most advanced medical systems moved in to attend to Padme, Anakin attempted to contact Palpatine. The response shocked him. His new master was on Mustafar. Had he gone there to stop Obi-Wan? But Anakin needed him here, now. When Palpatine finally responded, he assured Anakin of his imminent arrival. The med droids began their work immediately. Their scans revealed the twins were in distress. Immediate delivery would be necessary. The chief medical droid explained that while Padme exhibited severe psychological trauma, manifesting as physical symptoms, their neural stabilizers could counteract these effects while they prepared for the emergency delivery. Unlike the limited facilities of Polis Massa, these sophisticated systems could handle both the complex childbirth and her psychological state simultaneously. The medical center's delivery suite activated. The droids worked in perfect synchronization, monitoring both Padme and the twins' vital signs with unprecedented precision. Anakin stood vigil as the droids guided her through the delivery. Where in another timeline she might have slipped away, crushed by despair during childbirth, here she responded to his voice, his remorse, his explanations, his promises to make things right. The medical readings showed clear spikes in her life signs every time he spoke. The twins arrived safely, first Luke, then Leia. Rather than losing consciousness after their birth, as she might have elsewhere, Padme's vital signs stabilized. The medical facility's advanced systems had given her body the support it needed until her spirit could rally, the presence of both Anakin and her newborn children anchoring her to life. As Padme regained her strength in the medical center, Palpatine arrived from Mustafar. In private conversations with Anakin, he wove a careful narrative. Their actions had saved her. The elimination of the Jedi Order had been necessary. After all, hadn't Obi-Wan manipulated her, used her as bait? A Jedi Master had nearly caused her death. The logic twisted through Anakin's mind, finding purchase in his fears. You now speak with the Emperor's voice, Palpatine told him, and when I am gone, you will become Emperor. Together they would reshape the galaxy. Anakin watched his master disappear into the former Jedi Temple, now transforming into the Imperial Palace, stripped of its former sanctity. As Padme recovered in the medical center, days flowed into one another with the steady rhythm of machines and med droids. She grew stronger, the twins thrived, and Anakin remained constantly at her side. Soon they returned to her senatorial apartment, where the Coruscant sunset painted their reunion in deceptive shades of normalcy. But as days passed, the weight of recent events settled over them like gathering storm clouds. In their shared living space, Padme grew quieter, more contemplative. Her gaze often drifted to the twins, then to the distant spires of the transforming Jedi Temple. One evening, as Luke and Leia slept in their bassinets, she spoke of Naboo, of sending the children there, away from Coruscant, away from what the Republic was becoming. Anakin didn't protest. How could he? Each time she flinched at his sudden movements, each time her hand unconsciously touched her throat, when tension filled the air between them, these moments drove home the magnitude of his actions. His apologies poured out, desperate and frequent, but they both knew some wounds cut too deep for words to heal. A gulf opened between them, invisible but widening. Padme's love remained, but it was wounded. The memory of his attack, of his force grip around her throat while she carried their children, haunted every interaction. The parallel hit him. He had attacked Padme with the same blind fury he'd condemned in the Tusken Raiders, who killed his mother. He had force-choked the woman carrying his children. The recognition of what he'd done, what he'd become, ate at him with each passing day. The months stretched into years, each finding their own orbits in the new empire. Padme immersed herself in imperial senatorial duties, her voice resonating with both experience and integrity in those chambers. Anakin kept his distance, recognizing the need for space, but worked behind the scenes to strengthen her position. When he suggested to Palpatine that Padme deserved a seat on the Imperial Ruling Council, his master agreed readily enough. The Senate held little consequence now, with the Death Star taking shape in distant shadows. When Padme and her allies brought forward legislation to end the persecution of innocent Jedi, arguing that the actions of four masters should not condemn an entire order, Palpatine acquiesced with calculated indifference. The order itself would not be restored, but the hunting would cease. Palpatine approved their motion. The scattered Jedi survivors posed no threat, and allowing this small victory to Padme's coalition served his image as a merciful ruler who could forgive even those who had moved against him. Soon after, as Palpatine sequestered himself with arcane force research, particularly into Sith essence transfer, and Padme shaped policy in the Senate, Anakin found his own purpose. The memory of chains on Tatooine drove him to action. With the Emperor's voice and Imperial troops at his command, he launched a systematic dismantling of the galaxy's slave networks. Corporate slavers and their political patrons discovered their influence meant nothing against his determination. Every successful liberation, every broken chain, helped rebuild something inside him. Meanwhile, the twins grew up on Naboo, far from Coruscant's shadows. Anakin and Padme visited them often, though never together at first. But as years passed, as Anakin's actions showed a man far removed from the dark creature of Mustafar, the distance between them began to close. 6 years marked a gradual transformation. Anakin's campaign against slavery had reshaped not just the galaxy, but himself. He avoided the dark side's pull, finding no temptation in its promises. No force technique could heal what truly mattered. Padme saw in his actions the return of the man she'd loved, not the twisted figure who had raised a hand against her. She wanted to believe in this change, wanted to trust in his redemption. Palpatine observed it all with cold calculation. Anakin's growing power served his ultimate design, the ancient Sith technique of essence transfer that would let him claim his apprentice's body as his own. But for now, he watched as Anakin and Padme's paths slowly converged again, until finally they walked together up the steps of the Naboo Lake Retreat, where their children waited. In the highest echelons of the Imperial military, resentment simmered. Grand Moffs and Admirals, who had built their careers on strict hierarchical order, found themselves taking commands from a former Jedi. That Anakin wielded the Emperor's authority meant little to them. They saw him as an outsider, a religious zealot who had somehow gained unprecedented influence. Each time he issued orders with Palpatine's voice, their disdain deepened. Tarkin watched this discontent grow with calculating interest. Unlike his peers, he understood Anakin's complexity. Their shared experiences during the Clone Wars had forged a unique dynamic. Even the controversy surrounding Ahsoka Tano's trial hadn't completely severed their professional respect. Tarkin had simply followed evidence and protocol, and on some level, Anakin acknowledged this. After Ahsoka's presumed death in Order 66, an event Tarkin had no hand in, any remaining tension had gradually subsided. The Imperial leadership recognized they could not move against Anakin while Palpatine lived, but in that limitation, they saw opportunity. If Palpatine died first, they could pin his assassination on Anakin. With the Emperor dead and his chosen successor executed for treason, the military leadership could seize control of the Empire for themselves. Tarkin positioned himself carefully within these conspiracies. He saw opportunity in the growing divide. With his connection to Anakin, he could become the bridge between the new Emperor and the military establishment. His homeworld of Eriadu would prosper under such an arrangement. Yet Tarkin harbored his own suspicions about Palpatine. The night of Order 66 remained clouded in questions. How had 4 Jedi Masters failed to kill what appeared to be a defenseless Chancellor? The official reports noted Anakin's presence in the Chancellor's office that night, but details remained conspicuously vague. He advised the other Imperial leaders to operate under the assumption that Palpatine possessed abilities similar to the Jedi, specifically the power to sense approaching danger. We must assume, Tarkin told them, that like the Jedi, our Emperor can feel hostile intent before it manifests. This is why direct assassination attempts will fail. He let this sink in among the gathered officers before presenting his solution. They needed assassins who didn't know they were assassins. The opportunity presented itself in an upcoming banking clan delegation. The Mu'uns, tall, gaunt beings whose species had controlled galactic finance for millennia, would arrive with their traditional cases of documentation and financial instruments. Imperial security would scan these materials following standard protocol. In the brief interval between inspection and audience, the explosives would be planted. The Mu'un delegates would walk into Palpatine's presence carrying death, their minds free of any treasonous intent that might alert whatever mysterious powers the Emperor possessed. The plan unfolded with mechanical precision. The Mu'un delegation entered Palpatine's office, their cases scanned and cleared, now carrying an invisible death sentence. They spoke of trade route regulations, unaware of their role in galactic history. Then it happened. Palpatine's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, sensing something amiss. The implosion device activated. In an instant, the office collapsed inward. Guards, Mu'uns, furniture, and Emperor alike compressed into a sphere no larger than a toy Darien. 7 years of Imperial rule ended in that singular moment of violent physics. The news spread across the galaxy in carefully controlled waves. The banking clan bore the blame, though the exact story mattered little. The Empire's propaganda machine crafted the necessary narratives. On Naboo, in the serenity of their lake retreat, Anakin received the news with his wife at his side. His reaction was surprisingly muted, neither joy nor grief, just quiet acceptance of his new reality. His popularity among the common people already exceeded Palpatine's. The transition to Emperor Skywalker seemed natural. The conspirators gathered on a vessel of Tarkin's choosing, their success breeding new ambitions. Tarkin's delayed arrival, appearing only via hologram, raised no suspicions. The debate turned heated. Tarkin advocated working with Anakin, citing the new Emperor's disinterest in administrative minutiae as an advantage. "Work with him," one of the admirals spat. "That scummy Jedi? We've spent years taking orders from this religious zealot. Now we can pin Palpatine's death on him, claim he murdered his way to the throne, like the treacherous Jedi he is." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. "With the Jedi executed," another added, "we can argue that leaving the entire galaxy in the hands of one entity is dangerous. Each of us can claim our rightful territory." Tarkin listened, his expression betraying nothing. He understood the inevitable truth. This alliance would splinter into civil war the moment their shared enemy vanished. These men would tear apart everything he had worked toward. His position on Eriadu, his influence with Anakin, all would crumble in their power grab. "Most unfortunate we couldn't reach an agreement," Tarkin said finally, his hologram flickering. The others barely had time to process his words before the ship's rigged hyperdrive detonated, erasing the final traces of conspiracy from the galaxy. The official investigation would find only evidence of mechanical failure, a tragic accident in hyperspace. After the deaths of the conspirators, Tarkin smoothly assumed his position as Anakin's second military commander. Their alliance made sense. Both men valued direct action over political maneuvering. When Anakin granted Eriadu expanded privileges and resources, Tarkin saw his gamble had paid off. Anakin mused once that perhaps the implosion weapon was the true chosen one, since it had destroyed the last Sith Lord. He never realized how his wielding of Palpatine's authority had fueled the military's resentment made worse by his Jedi past. That combination had ultimately led to his master's death. The Empire transformed with Palpatine's inner circle gone. Mas Amedda, Sly Moore, their deaths created vacuums that Padme and her allies filled. Anakin left most governance to them, intervening only when necessary. He had no intention of restoring the Republic. He believed only a firm hand could prevent the galaxy from sliding back into corruption and slavery. That hand would be his, but he wielded it sparingly, letting the Council handle day-to-day administration. The surviving Jedi, no longer hunted, rebuilt their lives in quiet corners of the galaxy. Some gathered in secret, viewing Anakin as a Sith who needed to be destroyed. But uncertainty plagued their plans. He had grown more powerful than Palpatine ever was, and his connection to the dark side had diminished. Without the burning rage that had driven him on Mustafar, he presented a complex target. They waited, watched, and debated. As for the Death Star project, Anakin did not terminate it, but halted its construction, uncertain about creating a weapon of such devastating power, despite Tarkin's insistence. He kept this from Padme, knowing she would never agree, so it remained a secret project hanging over Geonosis, its future uncertain. But while the Death Star's fate remained undecided, Anakin was determined that Luke and Leia's future would be secure. They grew up on Naboo, their Force abilities strengthening with each passing day. Whatever the future might hold, for now, there was peace. Master Yoda and Ki-Adi-Mundi used the Death Star to destroy Kashyyyk twice.